Dans la rue de Bamako, j'ai connu la couleur de ta peau qui brille sous le soleil vermeil. C'est dans les rues du vieux Dakar que j'ai vu tous ces vieux regards perdus dans le hasard de la vie. Crois en Dieu, je crois en toi, car j'ai la foi de me croire heureux si toi tu restes auprès.
Welcome to Crossing Cultural Boundaries. I am your host, Ahmed Kassim, and thank you for joining us this special segment that we're airing from JBS Center in Brooks, Alberta. We are very honored to have in the studio today Professor Roger Parent, who is the director of an award-winning documentary, National Film Board, Sherbrooke To Brooks, Alberta. Welcome to the program, Professor Roger.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Well, when I made the film, I was a professor at the University of Alberta. And as professor at the university, or professor researcher at the University of Alberta, I was very much interested in cultures, in stories about cultures in Western Canada. I'm from Western Canada, and I have always felt that there were so many wonderful cultural stories around us in Western Canada that just had to be told. And I was also, as a researcher, interested in those untold stories because they are an indication, it's a way of informing the public of what Canadians are living. And so when I first became aware of Brooks and the story of what was going on in Brooks with respect to French-speaking Africans, I didn't even know there were French-speaking Africans in Brooks. I didn't know that there was a French school in Brooks. And at that time, when we started making the story, Brooks had been stigmatized by many of the labor disputes, and it had a bad name. And so my colleague, Dr. Merlatris at the University of Alberta, a sociologist from the Congo, had completed about 10 years of research on what happens to Africans when they try to start up a new life here in Canada. And it was that research, and it was my passion for making that research come alive through story that gave rise to this particular documentary and this fascinating phenomena that there was actually an immigration corridor from Africa to Sherbrooke to Brooks. And that's the story we wanted to tell.
Wow, that's a, so the story was something that leads you to do the research, and then with your colleague, doctor, that's how you decide to move on to the documentary side.
Yes, and there's also another very important thing we must consider here, is that although academic research might be fascinating, Dr. Merlatris' research really, was a revelation across Canada for people doing any kind of work on immigration, but you need money. Yeah. You need an important amount of money to do a quality doc, and so we were extremely fortunate and extremely blessed to have the National Film Board actually come on board and to say, we will invest in this and we will go in as the sole partner. So usually the National Film Board will finance a production as a minority partner. They took full responsibility for this. A lot of people believed in this story and believed that this was a story that had to be told And we were very fortunate to have the National Film Board just do all it could and put all its resources behind the project and create the documentary that the finished product.
Actually, I met with the doctor, your colleague in Edmonton, and very gentleman and nice person who is has a very proud side of being an African, and very proud to do his research well. So,
and that's another point, is that having access to new Canadians, for example, especially refugees coming from Africa, coming out of war-torn countries, civil war, genocide. They have lived very hard lives, and even in Canada, they have very complicated lives. And so it's difficult to have access to this community. And that was the major obstacle in making the film. And thank goodness we had Dr. Milatros, who not only was very well respected for his research, but he was also a leader in the community. And that is what allowed me, that is what allowed my team, my production unit, to have privileged access to the wonderful people we can see in the doc.
Thank you very much. Let's watch clip of the first sequence of the documentary.
Yes, please.
Je m'appelle Angèle. Je suis née au Congo, à Sud Kivu, à Uvira. J'ai quelques souvenirs qui me reviennent de temps en temps dans ma tête, des guerres. J'avais à l'époque 8 ans, 9 ans comme ça. Je me rappelle, le monsieur m'a mis son pistolet, son arme dans mon dos, que si je bouge, je vais mourir. Puis moi, j'étais là, je ne savais plus quoi faire. Et il y avait une idée qui est venue dans ma tête de regarder alentour. J'ai commencé à regarder alentour, j'ai vu une petite lumière qui sortait quelque part d'un petit endroit. Je commençais à suivre la lumière, je suivais la lumière. Et puis c'était une fenêtre.
J'ai travaillé avec les organismes de défense des droits de la personne en République démocratique du Congo. Et c'est tout ce qui s'est passé à côté de moi que j'essaie de dénoncer. Tu sais, il y a une chose, moi, que j'ai toujours dit aux gens et je l'ai toujours répété, c'est cette citation de Mère Césaire qui a dit qu'un homme qui crie n'est pas un ours qui danse. Ces gens-là ont beaucoup crié, mais est-ce que c'était un animal qui dansait? Est-ce que leurs cris ont atteint les oreilles des gens? C'était ça. Et il fallait vraiment se mobiliser parce que ce sont des humains comme nous qui souffraient.
Yeah, thanks, Professor Roger. Watching the first sequence of the documentary, the refugees fleeing from their home country. What do you think?
Well, we were convinced that there was an unsatisfactory representation made of refugees in Canada, because what we had been seeing in the media did not fully portray the lived experience of these people and the horror and the trauma that they faced. And we were absolutely convinced that in order to understand what they lived now, we had to go back to the past. We had to evoke those refugee camps. We had to we had to present off the top that tragedy that changed their lives completely and left them at the mercy, of destiny. And like most people didn't, many people didn't make it. Many people are still in those refugee camps, and how somehow they got chosen and they made it to Canada. Not as immigrants that choose, that go through a process, but that is what it is to flee for your life. And we were extremely fortunate to have two protagonists that were very open and capable of sharing with us that trauma. And what is also what we've received many times as comments with respect to that testimonial is the dignity with which they speak and the composure. So I think that there's a tremendous lesson for us to learn from this. And I must add that it is Angèle's testimony that really got the documentary going. We did not know as we started the interview that she would share this with us. At the very beginning, she didn't even want to participate. She was there saying, my life is very complicated, and you know, why should I say this to you? And that now, when she saw the finished product, she's very happy. She says, you know, now my story is told. I won't be here all eternally, but my story will remain.
Yeah, so most of the refugees, they leave their home country because of fear of their lives. The difference between someone who immigrates from their country and come by choice, either to Canada or Australia, the US, UK, France, those are, they will immigrate to those countries by choice. Refugees is different totally. Refugees is one day you are at home having fun, and then next day you will be running for your lives and your family. It's based on civil war, one-ton society. So when you have your neighbor for 50 years, that you know for 50 years, you've been neighbor for 50 years. They come one day and start shooting your family or yourself. It's difficult, so you run away whatever that you can save at the time, whether your family members, and running away from the country. Then you come to a different country, which is a host nation. The UN technically will not recognize someone running away from their home country as a refugee. You will be only recognized as a refugee if you cross the border of your country to the next nation. If you are within your own border, within the same with your own country, that you will be called internal displaced persons. So internal displaced persons are also refugees within their home country. And that's prime example of the refugees running away from Syria. If they don't come to Lebanon, they will not be a refugee. They will be internal displaced people within the border of Syria. So those are internal displaced persons.
So the next question we asked ourselves, I'm a refugee. I've crossed the border. I'm with my family in a refugee camp. What is the image they have of Canada? What is the expectation they have of Canada? What is the dream they have of Canada? What are immigration officials from Canada telling these populations? And then what is the reality of arriving in Canada? And that's the next major part of the voyage that we wanted to show.
And that is a very good one to show, because when you leave your home country, you become refugee to a host country. The nations that hosting the refugees cannot sustain economically as well, population-wise, because when you have 500,000 people coming to your country, it will increase also some difficulties for those countries. And the UN, Western nations, usually help those host countries. Refugees, their dream is to leave the host country and come to the Western countries, whether it's the US, Canada, and all those. That will come, their dream come true. These are the land of opportunities.
Yeah, and that's what we tried to show. There's the illusion, there's the dream, and then there's the reality. And most of the French-speaking refugees from Africa, like from Rwanda, from the Congo, they end up in Sherbrooke. And that's why the documentary was entitled From Sherbrooke to Brooks. So we go from Africa to Sherbrooke, and it's that arrival in Canada that we wanted to show. And then why was there the move to Brooks?
That is a good one. And I think leaving the continent and coming to Canada, that's a dream come true. But their dream and what the reality might be in Canada could be also a wake-up call. Coming to a country that they have no clue, they don't have anybody. So that is another stress level, which increase the stress level that they come, so they will come into unknown area, and that unknown fear will have an impact on their health, their families. So why don't we watch the second clip and then go from there?
Moi, je m'appelle Estella Kasaba. J'étais restée 3 ans à Sherbrooke et j'étais en 3e année quand on a déménagé ici à Brooks. Un jour, j'étais à l'école, je savais même pas qu'on allait déménager. À l'école, on m'appelle à l'intercom et c'est là, ton père est ici. Après, mon père a dit, prends ton sac et ton manteau, on déménage. On a conduit ici, ça a pris comme 4 jours. Quand je suis arrivée à Brooks, ça puait vraiment la vache. C'est quoi cette odeur? Mais après, j'ai appris qu'il y avait une usine et que les gens travaillaient là-bas. C'est à cause des vaches et des choses comme ça. Mais je trouvais que c'était vraiment petit aussi. Et c'était vraiment difficile parce que je parlais pas l'anglais du tout. Et je communiquais, je disais juste n'importe quoi en anglais. Et puis les autres riaient de moi parce que j'avais un accent vraiment français quand je parlais. Mais maintenant, je parle 3 langues, le swahili, le français et l'anglais. Je suis fière.
So now we watch the second clip when a refugee arrived this beautiful country, and they arrive in Sherbrooke, Quebec. So tell us about that, their expectation and the reality.
The expectations are enormous. Internationally, our country is a dream country, especially for refugees that have lost everything, that have to rebuild their life. To come to Canada is a land of opportunity where everything is possible. That is the dream. The reality is much different. And here again, I think we have to appreciate what new Canadians go through. They're adapting to a new country. The French-speaking Africans that we spoke to, the ones that will then leave Quebec to come to Brooks, they truly love Canada. They truly love French Canada. They often refer to French Canada, to Quebec, as their native country. The major problem is surviving financially, in that it is extremely difficult for our new Canadians to find meaningful, adequate employment. Now, the people that we feature in this documentary, we're focusing in on those who arrived around 2005, you see. And after the initial 52 weeks, there are no jobs. There is no. It's very difficult to, if I have a master's degree, if I'm a teacher, if I'm a doctor, my credentials are not recognized, and so there is a very difficult choice. I have crossed the ocean. I have left my country. I've spent years in a refugee camp. My children, for example, have never been to school. They should be in grade 6, they should be in grade 7. They've never had formal schooling. How do I integrate into Canadian society and into French society? And the basic reality is that there is a hemorrhage of these people then having to continue their quest in search of employment, and again to transition, and now to transition to an English part of Canada. And in this case, with the immigration corridor between Sherbrooke and Brooks, what happened is that Brooks, with the meatpacking plant, offers employment. It's very hard work, but it offers well-paying jobs, you know, and you don't have to speak English. And so those conditions resulted in a massive movement out of Sherbrooke to Brooks. And at that point in time, because Brooks was going through a very difficult time, many of these new Canadians that came out to Brooks were like young men or young adolescent boys who were not legally qualified to work, and they were getting employment. They were living 4 or 5 in the same house. The living conditions reminded my colleague of the way Irish young youth would live during the coal mine era, let's say at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And it is that idea, that is the idea that sparked the research, that sparked the documentary, and we wanted to follow what it's like. I'm from Africa, I come to Canada, wait a minute, my dream, this is not working the way it should. How can I survive? And that's when you have people like Désiré and Angèle playing a leadership role, coming to Brooks and establishing themselves, and also establishing French language in Brooks.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. One of the participants of the documentary, Angela and Desiree, all of them, I think the also perception of the fact that they came from a Francophone nations in Africa would not guarantee when they come to Sherbrooke that the French speaking is the same French speaking in Quebec. So that's another difficulty that they will have of the accent. Probably they're coming from Francophone nations in Africa.
There's a deeper problem. That's very true. There's a deeper problem, and that problem is there's a disconnect between immigration policy and what immigration officials are trying to do and what the population wants. And there's a deep-seated resistance. They decide, okay, we're going to, I want to work, there are no jobs. It's not true. There are jobs, but the jobs do not go to black people. The jobs do not go to Canadians that are non-whites, and it's there, and it continues to be there even today.
And why is that, you think?
It's because speaking to very dedicated immigration officials in Sherbrooke, very dedicated, and wanting very much to help these refugees, these new Canadians, those officials did not realize that the population did not want this. And they are just starting now to try and promote a change of attitude in the local population with respect to integrating our new Canadians, integrating our Canadians that are from many different nationalities. And they endured, they were very gracious in not talking about what they went through. And that also very much impressed the many viewers of the film, is that these protagonists have got class. They've got humanity and they've got class. And their description of how they dealt with this discrimination is done with extreme discretion, and it's a lesson for us all.
That's wonderful. The other fact also plays into the misinformation. I was talking to a gentleman who is a Caucasian, well-educated, and one of the things that when we had the discussion, he said, I don't like the immigrants, and when I asked him, he said, because they don't pay tax. And he's a grown-up, well-educated, with a degree of master's degree. And I asked him, I said, why is that? He said, look at JBS. They don't pay tax. I said, where do you get your facts? No, I was told by someone. I said, okay. I said, don't listen from me and don't take it from my side. Why don't you just see the Canadian Review Agency, CRA, and then see if there is any exception to the rule of a taxing individual in Canada? There are none. But he was told by someone else. The good thing of the gentleman was he promised that he's going to look at, and he did. After 2 days, he phoned me. He said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I went to the CRA website and realized immigrants pay tax. But he was misinformed by someone with no facts attached to him.
So I hope that this kind of doc can help clarify perceptions and help us cross those cultural borders. Not only from Africa to Canada, but there are huge borders between French Canada and English Canada, and between whites and non-whites, and between natives and non, and so this documentary is certainly part of a much larger issue. But then the next thing that we wanted to show was, okay, what happens 10 years down the road? And that's why we got our next protagonist, our third protagonist, is Stella, who was about in grade 3 when she came to Sherbrooke, and she was in grade 4 when all of a sudden Papa said, hey, we're moving to Brooks.
That's so wonderful, and I think she did very well, adapted to Brooks. But Professor, why would, when you talk about immigration and immigrants and immigration policies, the nation needs immigrants to come for economic growth of Canada to compete with the industrial nations. What do you think is the advantage of having more immigrants to Canada is?
Well, that's a very, very complex question, and it sort of goes beyond the documentary. Yeah. But I think that our new Canadians bring with them a tremendous potential, a tremendous human potential that we are not sufficiently developing. And we need new Canadians. We need immigration just for our birth rate, first of all. And secondly, for the renewal of the kind of democratic society that we have.
Thank you very much. I think that was a point that needs to be told or asked, because most of the people will be able to know the value added by the immigrants to the society in Canada, the US, or in other Western nations that have immigrants coming to their country. So coming from Sherbrooke to Brooks, why don't we just watch the third clip and see how they adapted the traveling from Sherbrooke to Brooks and how they adapted in this beautiful city and county of Newell and this beautiful province, Alberta.
Vous travaillez dans une situation très, très, très stressante. Parce qu'il y a de la pression à tous les niveaux. Il faut vraiment travailler fort pour qu'on arrive à un total de 4000 bœufs par jour. Il faut voir avec quelle vitesse les gens travaillent.
Un travail à Brooks, c'était un shift de la nuit. J'ai nettoyé les machines la nuit, dans les chambres froides. C'était là où on gelait les vaches, dans les congélateurs carrément gelés. Donc il y avait les combinaisons qu'on habillait pour se protéger, mais c'était très froid à mourir.
Okay, now we watch the third clip. When refugees come from Africa, they came to Sherbrooke. They left everything behind. When they came to Sherbrooke, they adapted in Sherbrooke. Was so difficult because there was no support in Sherbrooke when they arrived. But when they adapted and they stayed for some time in Sherbrooke, because of lack of jobs, lack of other factories, racism, all those factors, they heard that there's a plant in Brooks, JBS, and they want to come to Brooks in Alberta. So can you tell us a little bit about that factor, because living again from Sherbrooke, coming to unknown area, the stress level and difficulties that they face?
This is certainly, Ahmed, one of the major reasons why we wanted to make that film. We can celebrate the success stories. Estella Casaba and her wonderful family, Mr. and Mrs. Casaba came out in 2005 at about the same time as Desiree and Angel. And this family has been a prototype of a family who has planted its roots here in Brooks. It contributes to the community and have raised wonderful children. And Estella has one big time. You know, she speaks 3 languages. She's now studying at the University of Ottawa. She has a wonderful exposure to what it is, you know, the international world of culture. She's got that. Brooks gave her that. However, there is a negative side, because some people would come from Sherbrooke, they go to Brooks, and then it wouldn't work out, and they go back. And so there's this movement back and forth inside the corridor. And Angel, what happened in Angel's case happens in so many other cases. And that she comes, she's a young mom, she and her husband try and make a go of it. She does the B shift, he does the A shift or whatever, and they're playing this tag team. And all of a sudden, there's the marriage breakup. And it's horrible for both of them, but because of the strain they're under, because of the pressure they've been under since Africa.
Yeah.
And they just keep on going. They just keep on going. They have to survive. And all of a sudden, you've got a really tough job. You got a marriage breakup, and you just break down. And this is what happened to Angel. She contracted a very serious illness. The good news is that she lost her children for a while, you know. And this happens to many new Canadians. The arbitrary taking of kids by people who don't understand the situation. And she just hightails it back to Quebec because her family is there. And she knows that if she dies because of this illness, then her family will take care of her children. And so here is where we featured the work at the GBS plant. But at the same time, it was a major difficulty. It was a major difficulty we had because it was not necessarily important to get into the plant, because we're not talking about JBS now. Now is a different story in 2015. We were evoking the situation in Brooks in 2005. And that's why the images that you see of a meatpacking plant are not those of GBS. They are those of, I think, a meatpacking plant in Balzac. Because what we're trying to show is not she got sick because of the work. No, she got sick because of the tremendous pressure that she was under, that her husband was under, that her kids were under. You can only take so much.
And the flashbacks.
And the flashback. And what the story then tries to show is where Brooks has really turned it around, including GBS, is families can endure that particular stress if they have proper psychosocial support in the community. And if there's strong community support, then families like the Casabas say, okay, I'm going to go to bat for, we came here so that our kids could have an education and a future, and we will sacrifice our generation to do that. That's what the Casabas have done. And so Angèle reminds us of the price paid, the breakup rate, the divorce rate among these new Canadians is horrendous. They are paying a price because there is no proper psychosocial support, especially in big cities. There is no meaningful employment. They have no time for their kids because they're working at these impossible jobs. And so Angèle's situation reminds us of that, but it also allowed us, by showing that 10-year span, how Brooks has really turned it around, and how Brooks and what's going on in Brooks can be a model for the rest of Canada.
No, that's good to hear. The fact that Estella also, she won the Youth Citizenship Award. People
like Estella are going to be leaders in the years to come. And it's a tribute to the fine schools that we have here in Brooks that are more and more attuned into setting this youth up for success.
That was a good success story of Estella and Casaba family. Both the husband and the wife, I know them personally, and they are both hard workers and good family. What is the PTSD? Those who are suffering coming from those countries, what do you think the role of the PTSD to the immigrants is when they run away from refugee camps and Africa, and whether Africa or Syria or other places, they come to this wonderful country, land of opportunity, but still the flashbacks of that post-traumatic stress is there. What effect would that have them in the long run, as also a society?
It's huge. It's huge. And at the moment where we are, current policy is that we will not treat the psychological. Governments will provide funding for physical, treating only the physical, but assistance in treating the psychological post-traumatic stress, that is a growth area, and it's a huge one.
So how would these people get the help that they need?
They're not getting it. And social workers are very, very clear on that point, and they're pressing, but right now that does not exist.
But you would hope that someday it will exist so it can help those people who are suffering the PTSD, whether it's a newcomer or the host country, long-term residents of Canada.
This is what Professor Milatros' research has shown. We're going to pay a price tag. Just in between 2005 and 2015, the African influx to Brooks and in Western Canada, Africans during that period became the second most important population in our Canadian prisons. When you put new Canadians, when you put people in positions like that, they are vulnerable to predators, criminality. To keep a man in prison is cost a taxpayer $175,000
per year.
Per year.
Wow.
And so an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But when you have marriage breakup, single-parent families, school dropouts,
Domestic violence.
Domestic violence. You have people who are working and they've got no pension fund for retirement. The Canadian taxpayer is, if we don't do a better job harnessing the potential of our new Canadians, the Canadian taxpayer is going to be facing a pretty salty bill down the road.
Wow. So prevention will be much easier and much preventative and proactive.
Definitely, and this is, look what you've done here in Brooks with the police. You've got a police force here and in Calgary that is recognized internationally. I'm sorry, internationally, I'm going maybe a little bit too far, but definitely national recognition for its work in creating safe communities for our new Canadians. Because don't worry, the predators are there, and those predators, not just criminals, that's where radicalization starts. And so if we create situations where our Canadians, our new Canadians, are excluded, are vulnerable, are isolated, are marginalized, that's exactly where radicalization can emerge here in Canada and here in Western Canada.
So is the route that happened in France back then?
Yes. What happened in France is that you have, ever since the 1960s, they take immigrants, refugees, and they just make these huge housing complexes outside of the city and they forget about them. And they are systematically marginalized, excluded, no jobs. And so the third generation, these are the terrorists now. It's not the first two. And it's in Paris right now, or in France, in Europe, in Belgium. It's even hip, it's really stylish to be a terrorist, to be radicalized. There's even clothing styles and all that.
So this is the third generation?
This is the third generation, yeah.
Okay, so because of the mistake or the miscalculation back in 1960s? Because
of the fact that they isolated these people. And they made them invisible. They're not on the radar. We don't talk about them. And that's why we need more documentaries, more films, to increase the visibility of our new Canadians in mainstream media.
Well, I think that is having said that, I believe that is there is a value added when you bring things on the surface. Then you will be able to know and bring them the comfortable zone they are in to the mainstream Canadians, or start inclusive. The new Canadians also have to take a responsibility by willing also to get to the plate and then try to integrate also to the society that we are in. Don't you think so?
Well, that's what we tried to show in the next clip, is how Angèle, she was in Brooks here for a while. Yeah. Now she's back in Sherbrooke. So let's see what she's doing.
There you go. So why don't we watch the fourth clip?
Ça fait déjà 2 ans et demi que je suis venue de l'Alberta. Et puis, mon rêve, c'était d'avoir quelque chose que je veux faire dans la vie. C'est 2 ans et demi que j'ai attendu. Et puis, je l'ai eu. Là, je fais ce stage-là. Ça me fait plaisir. Je connais beaucoup de gens qui ont déjà fait les stages et qui ont déjà les certificats, les diplômes. Mais ils ont fini, mais ils n'arrivent pas à trouver le job qui les convient. Peut-être parce qu'ils sont immigrants, parce qu'il y a les accents aussi qui nous trahissent ici au Québec, je peux dire. Et ton plat, monsieur Bleu. Bon appétit. C'est Angèle, hein? C'est Angèle, c'est ça. Tu es très bien. Merci beaucoup. C'est gentil.
Beaucoup de mes amis sont partis, mais je n'ai pas gardé contact avec eux. Parce que, bon, il y avait aussi cette fierté d'être québécois et tout ça. Mais quand le portefeuille est toujours mince comme ça, la fierté, ça prend un coup, là. Ouais.
Ça commence aussi à devenir mince.
Ouais, c'est ça. Donc, non, ce serait génial de faire un saut là-bas, voir un peu comment ça se passe. Tu vois, là où j'ai été chercher mon fils tantôt, dans le bloc, dans le bloc dans lequel se trouve ma soeur, Il y a à peu près, je te dirais, 5 à 6 personnes que ça fait 2 ans qu'ils ne travaillent pas.
2 ans
2
sans
ans
travail.
sans travail. Et ces gens-là, ils vont porter leur CV pratiquement à tous les jours.
Okay, Professor Roger, now we watch the fourth clip that Angela, she came to Brooks. She worked for JBS for a little bit, for a while, a couple of years, and then she went back to Quebec. What was the impression for her going back to Quebec, and how was she adapted in Quebec?
Angèle's trajectory from Africa to Sherbrooke, from Sherbrooke to Brooks, back to Sherbrooke. In the end, despite the heartbreak that she lived, that she and her family lived here in Brooks, it resolved positively. First of all, one must commend the services that Angèle received that helped rebuild her as a person. Today, she is a very strong person. She has matured. She still has beautiful memories of Brooks. She's proud that she has learned to speak English. And at the same time, her attitude resembles that of so many other refugees, that maybe the dreams she had before when she was in the refugee camp and the dreams she had of Canada were shattered and quite brutally shattered. But at the same time, her family is in Sherbrooke, her mother is in Sherbrooke, her grandmother is in Sherbrooke. She's surrounded with her kids, she's got her sisters, and there is a tight family, an enlarged family there that is truly beautiful to see. And she's happy there. And so she has, I think, completed her quest. She continues to look for jobs. She's always filling out her CV, but she's always taking new courses. But she at least has found a safe place, and she's surrounded by loved ones. And so I think for Angèle, that tremendous Brooks adventure, the tremendous Alberta adventure, finished well, and I'm very happy for her, and I'm also very thankful to her family, and to all of the protagonists who opened their doors and who were so generous and dignified in allowing us to tell their story. But at the same time, Angèle's story reminds us that for many of these refugees, their lives are they're in constant displacement. There are no jobs. They'll go get seasonal jobs and work in the forest, work in the forest industry in British Columbia. They'll come back, they'll get another job up in Northern Ontario. For these people, there is no stopping. There are no roots. It's a simple, continual displacement for survival in an attempt to try and get stability. And so that's constant movement, this constant mobility, this constant displacement is characteristic of the lifestyles of these people as they attempt, and I say as they attempt to remake their lives.
Having said a good point, which is the point of Angèle. She came to Brooks, Alberta, and went back to Quebec, and she's doing good. And we hope her to excel and become a successful person in Quebec. But what is the price as a society we are looking at, for example, of those immigrants coming, either refugees or other places, suffering with PTSD? What do you think might the society will have an impact when it comes to public safety?
One can only hope that the current restrictions on services provided to our new Canadians with respect to trauma lived, that these services will become satisfactory and meet needs now. Otherwise, the possibilities for violence, the possibility for violent outbreaks, these people are vulnerable to predators, and the more we have people fall in between the cracks, right? The more we as a society are making ourselves vulnerable to those extremist movements that are out there right now and that feed off situations like that and that use situations like this to cleavage, to divide us, to divide Canadians, and to get into us versus them, and to get into finger pointing, and to get into blaming, and then to get into, violence. Like, there are in certain cities, I won't name which ones, but there are certain cities in 2005, parents were actually encouraging their children. You see, they would say, "You see that black kid in the park there? Go and beat him up." We've been there as a society, and it's only by meeting the needs of these new Canadians and of attempting to understand their story that maybe we can change the trajectory of their story, but also change the trajectory, the negative scenarios that are facing us, not just in Brooks and in Alberta, but as a country.
After all, we are a nation of immigrants.
That's true.
And those who came many years, those who came long time ago, they went through the same difficulties that the new immigrants are going through. The only difference is these guys are running away for their lives.
And we must, I would suggest as a closing remark, we must protect our collective memory. And as Angèle said to me, I'm not always going to be here, but my story will live on. And we have to tell the life stories of these new Canadians so that their stories can become mainstream history. We cannot repeat past mistakes in Canada and allow the erasing of the history of entire peoples, and that's starting with the First Nations.
Well said, Professor Roger, and we are very honored to have you. And the award-winning documentary that you made is now in Africa, where people are watching the Africans in Canada, and they are watching the beautiful continent of Africa. So that's alone is remarkable.
Yes, that's very, very satisfying, and it's proof. It's proof of what can happen when you have a town that really turns it around, like Brooks. You have wonderful protagonists, but you also have the people, like institutions like the National Film Board, who are ready to provide funds to get these stories told.
Well said. And when it comes to Brooks and County of Newell, and I would say in Alberta, southeastern of Alberta, all these success stories was collective vision of the communities, the leaders, and those who were involved. And we hope to see more similar ones, good stories coming about the immigrants and mainstream Canadians in the near future.
Certainly. And thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Roger.
My pleasure.
Thank you, and we hope to have you next time when you're around in Brooks, County of Newell. Thank you very much for watching the program today. We were very honored to have Professor Roger Parent, who has made a award-winning documentary, National Film Board, Sherbrooke To Brooks. And if you would like to see it, please go to the website of the National Film Board and you will be able to see the whole documentary. We urge you to watch it. Until then, this is Ahmed Kassim, host of the program today, airing from JBS Center, and we thank City of Brooks for providing this facility. Until then, God bless you, everyone. Keep hope alive.
Dans la rue de Bamako, j'ai connu la couleur de ta peau qui brille sous le soleil vermeil. C'est dans les rues du vieux Dakar que j'ai vu tous ces vieux regards perdus dans le hasard de la vie. Crois en Dieu, je crois en toi car j'ai...